Israelite disaster when serving Yah without Yah. Israelite disaster when serving Yah without Yah. Our keynote scriptures are Acts chapter 7, verses 40 through 43. Saying unto Aharon, make us gods to go before us. For as for this Moses, which brought us out of the land of Egypt, we want not what is become of him. And they made a calf in those days and offered sacrifice unto the idol and rejoiced in the works of their own hands. Then Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven. As it is written in the book of the prophets, O you house of Israel, have you offered to me slain beasts and sacrifices by the space of 40 years in the wilderness? Yes, you took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god, Remphan, figures which you made to worship them. And I will carry you away beyond Babylon. May Yah add a blessing to the reading and the hearing of his word. As Stephen gave his testimony here in chapter 7 of Acts, as he gave his testimony before the Sanhedrin court in Jerusalem, where he stood trial for the capital offense of blasphemy. He testified that Israelites historically often tried to serve and worship Yah by their own methods rather than by Yah's decrees and commandments. And in so doing, Yah was not pleased with Israel's offerings of service and would not bless it, but instead cursed them for rebellion to his commandments. There is a danger to Israelites now that are doing Yah's worship different than what he commands us to do, but they still believe he will bless us for this, when in reality, he does not bless Israelites for disobedience and false worship, even if it seems right to the majority. In fact, just the opposite. Yah judges Israel for its rebellious disobedience, even when they feel they are doing something good for him. For instance, today, many Israelites perform the pagan goddess rituals of the egg and the rabbit of the goddess Astarte, which is called in English Easter. But they say they are actually glorifying Yahshua's resurrection with these pagan practices. Yes, yet this disobeys Yah's command to have no other Elohim beside him. Also, today, many Israelites, they perform the tree pole rituals out of the goddess Asherah, with the trees they set up in their homes and churches for Christmas, of which they claim is in worship and celebration of the birth of Yahshua, when in fact, he never commanded this, because it is in violation of the commandment to have no other gods beside him, as was also the case in the days of King Saul, who disobeyed Yah's commandment to kill all the livestock of the Amalekites. He instead saved some of them to use as sacrifices to Yah. This turned out to be a disaster for Saul when the prophet Samuel pronounced Yah's judgment to remove Saul's kingship because of his disobedience to the command of Yah, as stated in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 22 through 23. It states, and Samuel said, have Yah as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of Yah? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of Yah, he have also rejected thee from being king. Our master, Yahshua, testified to the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4, verse 21 through 24, that the Heavenly Father is looking for those who will worship him in spirit and truth. Yeshua said unto a woman, believe me, the hour cometh when you neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews, the Yahudim. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. Elohim, the Almighty, is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So likewise, in Stephen's testimony in Acts 7, verses 40 through 53, he cites examples of how Israelites have falsely assumed down through history that Yah is pleased with the pomp and pageantry of formal worship services when the participants are not committed to the truth of Yah's commands. Stephen is particularly pointing this out because he was accused before the Sanhedrin Council of blaspheming the temple because he was saying the way the people were worshiping there was not in sync with the commands of Yah. As was stated by false accusers against him, as recorded in Acts chapter 6, verse 13, they said regarding Stephen, this man ceaseth not to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law. So Stephen explains in reaction to these false accusations against him by citing instances in Israelite history when Israelites engaged in false assumptions about their worship and credibility before Yah, even though Yah was not pleased with their approaches of worship or with their lack of love of the truth in doing their worship rituals. Stephen is making the case that his message of Yahshua was not condemning the observance of the commandments and laws of Yah in the temple, but he was condemning Israelite practitioners of the law who were not understanding the spiritual meaning of Messiah Yeshua in those ceremonial laws they practiced in the temple, as was evident by the arrest and murder of Yeshua by the Sanhedrin, who are now also persecuting Stephen for his testimony of Yeshua. It is evident that down through history, even to this day, the Israelites have had a tendency to reject the witness of the message and messengers of Yah and try to serve Yah with their own understanding rather than what he commands. As my late elder Daniel Ben Hazel used to say, Israelites have a Burger King philosophy, do it your own way. Stephen testifies that Israelites have a Burger King philosophy of worship, do it your own way rather than Yah's way. Stephen testifies of this pattern in chapter 7, verses 40 through 41, which he says, quote, saying unto Aharon, make us gods to go before us. For as for this Moses, which brought us out of the land of Egypt, we want not what has become of him. They made a calf in those days and offered sacrifice unto the idol and rejoiced in the work of their own hands. Notice it says in verse 41 that it says, quote, about them in the time of Moses. It says, quote, that they rejoiced in the works of their own hands. In other words, they weren't rejoicing in the works of YAH, they were rejoicing in the works of their own improvised worship of YAH. If the piano player was playing good and he's a homosexual, it don't matter. If the people are swaying and praising and shouting, and yet homosexuals are in the choir stand, homosexuals are in the pulpit, homosexuals are on the organ and the piano, it doesn't matter. They rejoice in the work of their own hands rather than the work of the commands of YAH. In other words, Israelites take pride in the outer works of their own hand more than the inner works of obedience in their hearts, and take more pride in the work of their own hands rather than in the truth of YAH, as seen in their rejoicing over the golden calf. This attitude is what Stephen is saying gives Israelites misplaced emphasis on man-made religious success rather than YAH-made victories. This is why one of the big success stories a few years ago was a big event in Atlanta, Georgia, called Mega Fest. And they all came and with the, at that time, well-known Christian celebrities, but they had a kind of worldly slant on it, as though they were the special anointed because they could get the big crowds to show up for Mega Fest. And yet they were teaching that YAH doesn't anymore desire us to follow the commandments. Others were professing comedic entertainment. And then others invited people who are not even the true Jews, called Jews for Jesus, to come and speak regarding the Israelite sect, and yet the whole group themselves were the true Israelites, yet they're importing converts. So here we see it was a mega fest that really was a mega mess. And this is the way Israelites traditionally have done, as we see in this account Stephen's quoting from. And then they get an attitude when others of those who know the truth call them out about it. And then they come against it, as they did Stephen. This attitude is what Stephen is saying gives Israelites misplaced emphasis on man-made successes rather than YAH-made victories. All the thousands of Israelites were rejoicing over that golden calf, and they were all of those rejoicing on that golden calf, as many as they were. They had a mega fest, and it was nothing but a mega mess, a big mess. And yet they thought they were doing something. They thought YAH was impressed with this. And YAH told Moses, you better get down there. You better get down there. They quickly departed from me. Think about how y'all look at the way Israelites we do with Easter egg hunts, which are the symbol of a rabbit of fertility associated with the goddess Astarte. And we have congregations that celebrate the Easter egg hunts. I remember my little girl before we came into this truth, and we were all engaged in one of those Easter egg hunts. You know how some people would color the egg and put different colors on it. And my little girl, she got the egg, you know, they would hide them around, and she got the egg. She, you know, we had her all decked out in her Easter regalia. She had a brand new little pocketbook. And our little girl, our little 5-year-old girl, she took that Easter egg and put it in her pocketbook. And she forgot to take it out. So one day we were sitting in the car, about a week or two later, and I said, wait a minute, she was wearing that same pocketbook she got for her Easter regalia. We didn't know any better. And we said, well, what in the world is this smell coming from? And we opened up her pocketbook, and that Easter egg had become a rotten egg, and it stunk. And that's what YAH sees when we engage in false religion like that, thinking we celebrating the resurrection of Yeshua, when in reality, we're celebrating him with the trapping and trimming of the goddess Astarte religion, the goddess of fertility. And it stunk. It stinks to him, to high heaven, just like my little pretty little girl. We said she was the pretty little girl with the stinky pocketbook. Well, Israelites have been like that. We've been like this, the beautiful little girl, but our false way of serving Yah is stinky and smells up to high heaven like a rotten egg does. So we see that the Israelites had really annoyed Yah, and Moshe came down, and his servant Joshua, and he were getting ready to come down. Joshua said, it sounds like I hear the people, I hear the people getting ready to fight a war or something down there. Moshe said, no, son. These folk, it sounds like they singing and they doing things. See, they singing, and they assume they can sing and get the Holy Spirit, as they call it. It's not the true Ruach. And they fall out, and people have to throw towels over women's dresses, as they do now, and they get slain in the spirit. Moses said, no, these people done gone far away from Yah. And so in this case, Stephen was citing that Israelite pride in the work of their own hands and their worship or other practices of worship. They are pleased if man is pleased with what they do, as though Yah is going to be pleased with what they do, the same way man is pleased with what they do. And Yah said, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. My ways are not like your ways. As high as the heavens are upon the earth, are higher than the earth, so are my ways and my thoughts higher than your ways and thoughts. And so Stephen is citing that Israelite pride in the work of their own hands, rather than the work of Yah, are the same as an idol golden calf in Yah's sight. In Stephen's time in the 1st century AD, Israelites were taking more pride in the temple building, which was the work of their own hands, rather than in the truth of Yah's word. This is why they were violating the temple, making big business in the temple, where people were selling sacrificial items to those that were coming out of town. And so you had money change, you had a hustle going on. And they saw nothing wrong with what they were doing, because they had this big, beautiful edifice called the temple. And they had all of the ceremonies working. And all that did was just make the temple become like a place like Disneyland, like Cinderella's castle, where it's a fantasy. It's not reality, because they are not worshiping in spirit and in truth. They've just made the temple a spiritual Disneyland. And this is what Stephen's calling them out about. Even Yeshua went into the temple and drove out the money changers. And they got mad with him because he overturned their money. I know for a fact, and I've gotten the report, that we put up here in Chicago a lot of the billboards for the coming Hebrew to Negroes event down in Tampa Bay, Florida. We put them up all over town. Now we're finding out that some of the church people have gone around and tore some of them down. And why? Well, these people in these churches are politically connected with the hierarchy that runs the government of the city. And Hebrew Israelites are, for them, a distraction. Yet they support mayors like they did with the woman that was a lesbian, and they have her come and speak in their church so they can get a little few bucks for their supposed community development projects. It somehow ends up getting more as a project through their own pockets than to the community. These are the kind of people that want to tear down posters about events, talking about who we are, because the political hierarchy here, they look like us, they are us, but they're not of us. They are of the Gentiles. And even now we got a mayor the same way to replace her, maybe even worse than her. So just like in the time of Stephen, the religious hierarchy were praising Yah for the work of their own hands about the temple, which was the work of their own hands. But what was going on in the temple, they didn't care, because reality is the temple is only a place for interconnecting in worship with the Most High, not to showcase and take pride in your building, as some Israelite people do in the Baptist, Methodist, and other denominational churches. They can build big buildings and they take pride in those buildings, and they get worldly recognition, acclaim, and fame and political connections for the politicians to come and speak in their pulpits during election time. And yet they are not places of the truth. They are nothing but places, just like as the Israelites did in the time of Moses with the golden calf. They had pride in the work of their own hands, as it said. And we see Stephen is saying, you all have done this to the temple, the work of your own hands, where you are restricting the truth from being heard. You're restricting the message of the good news, and you're arresting people, and you killed the Messiah. What good is this building you have if there's no spirit and truth worship in it? That's why when the Samaritan woman said to Yeshua, well, you Hebrews, you say Jerusalem at your temple was the place where we worship. We should be worshiping. And we say it here in our mountain here in Samaria. Yeshua said, woman, is neither there in Jerusalem or here in Samaria that Yah is calling. Because at that time, both places were corrupt. Jerusalem, the temple people were corrupt, and the people in the temple in Samaria were corrupt, mixing in paganism with their worship of Yah. So he's saying the Father's looking for as such that will worship him in spirit and truth. He's not looking for people that want to worship and praise Yah for the work of their own hands when these things are out of sync with his commands. It's a disaster for Israelites to serve and worship Yah when Yah is not there. This is the kind of thing that Stephen was warning Israelites about during his testimony to the Sanhedrin. We also have another example. Likewise, in Dimona, Israel, our people, most of whom came here from the Chicago area, they like our ancient forefathers, they built a golden calf, that is a work of their own hands, which they take pride of, we call it Kifa Shalom in southern Israel. And they take pride in the work of their own hands, what they've done for that as a sign of their success, more than they take pride in the will and the command of YAH. They'll tell Israelites here that they have succeeded, but yet they followed a false Messiah named Ben Ami, who was a Chicago bus driver, a group of people from the South Side, the West Side, from DC, Detroit, primarily these areas initially, got behind this young man. And they went over to the land of Israel, and they managed to beg their way to get an old burnt out, beat up, worn out absorption shelter area that was originally for immigrants from Morocco. And they built it up, and now they have nerve to say with pride, we in the land, y'all not in the land, as though their accomplishment is a success. And they have a ceremony every year called New World Passover, where they celebrate the work of their own hands, the anniversary where they built up that community there in Dimona. It's dangerous for Israelites to do projects, the work of their own hand, when YAH is not with them. And I don't have time to go into all the disasters that have happened down there in Dimona and still are happening. And that always gets swept up under the rug, because the key for people like them is the work of our own hands. And even some of them are now saying, we don't need the Bible anymore. It's time for a new book. So you see, they're already beginning to emulate, as our forefathers did, who built the golden calf. Their golden calf is now their community they built there in Dimona. They're not worshiping in spirit and truth. And in fact, most of their young men on Shabbat aren't worshiping, period. They're caught up with the world. Just another day off from work. As the psalmist says in Psalm 127, verse 1, it says, except YAH build a house, they labor in vain that build it. Except YAH keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. Stephen continues to say in Acts 7, verse 42 to 43, that because they took more pride in the work of their hands than in the works of YAH, YAH left them to themselves. And they had no power to enter into the promises of YAH in the promised land for 40 years. And all of that generation, except for a couple people, all of that generation that was 21 and over, they all died in the desert, going nowhere. As stated, verse 42, then YAH turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets, O you house of Israel, have you offered to me slain beasts and sacrifices by the space of 40 years in the wilderness? Yea, you took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphath, figures which you made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. In verses 42 and 43 of Acts 7. As reported here, if it weren't bad enough about the golden calf, Stephen cites a passage from Amos chapter 5, verse 25 through 27 that describes more details about what happened in the wilderness during those 40-year sojourn. Believe it or not, beloved, we are not given all of the accounts in the Torah reports about all they did in that 40-year sojourn in the wilderness. We get bits and pieces of it, but Amos the prophet brings up something else that's not even recorded in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. He reports that they took on some more idolatry that is not even reported in the Exodus books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And he cites that along with golden calf worship, they're worshiping some other works of their own hands, as cited in verse 43. And when you read Amos chapter 5, verse 25 through 27, you get an impression there's more to this story than what we read in the book of Moses narratives about what they did wrong in the wilderness. That 40-year period they were in the wilderness, believe it or not, we don't know as much as has been commonly supposed as to what they were doing wrong during that whole time. And it was a lot going on wrong, such as these idol gods as cited in verse 43 that Stephen refers to in Acts chapter 7, verse 43. He cited that they were worshiping a Canaanite god called Moloch. So while they have a tabernacle, they also they have a tabernacle of the presence of YAH in their midst. They're also worshiping other gods as well. That's dangerous. So they had a Canaanite god, Amos reports, in Amos 5, verse 25 through 27. They worshiped a Canaanite god called Moloch. Now, Moloch, to worship him means you set a fire in front of him, of that idol. That means they made a moving statue of an idol god. The whole time they were moving with the tabernacle of YAH in the wilderness. They had another religion going on and still worship before that God, and still would be showing up at the tabernacle of YAH at the same time. You see, there's more to the story on why YAH killed allowed those people to die in the wilderness without coming in the promised land. They had corrupted themselves into a reprobate mind. And that's why it says in verse 42 of Acts 7 that YAH turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven. That is, when YAH gives up a person and say, I'm done trying to correct you, you want to be this way, like Yeshua says in the book of Revelation, he that is righteous, let him be righteous still, and he that is filthy, let him be filthy still. In other words, well, you want to have it your own way, Israel? Well, I'm going to leave you to do it your way and see how far that's going to get you. And it didn't get them far at all. For 40 years, they wandered on a trip that really should have taken them only a matter of months, less than a year. See, we can go into the false pride of religious success and assume we're going somewhere. But like I just stated, with the mega fest that some of these well-known people had set up, everybody thought that was the latest fad, the latest craze on the spiritual horizon of Black people in America. You don't hear nothing about it now. It died out. And next thing you know, there'll be some other ones coming up. But see, if you're not moving by truth, even if you momentarily seem like you have a success, you'll see, just like they saw in the wilderness, your capacity to maintain that will diminish, left to yourself. And it says they did this with the tabernacle of Moloch. That was their mega fest of that time. That saying, well, you can do both. They were ecumenical, which means, well, it doesn't matter what God you serve. It's just as matter that you serve God, as they would say. There are many ways to God. And, whether you call them Moloch or, you call them Yah, it doesn't matter. That's the way of the world. And people that teach and preach that, they can get a lot of money and build big edifices, the work of their hands, and can become popular with politicians, with the media, as being great people. And Yah eventually saw this tendency in Israelites, and he said, I'm done with you. I'm going to give y'all up. Just keep wandering around in the wilderness, because I'm not going to be there for you against your enemies. I'm not going to be there to support your armies. Let Moloch support your armies. Let that false god. I'm going to leave you to Moloch. And then they had another god, and that Stephen brings out of Amos chapter 5, verse 27. They had a star god called Ramphan. In verses 42 and 43, he cites that this god Ramphan was actually an Assyrian Babylonian star god called in Greek Remphan, but in Hebrew he's called Kion. Remphan worship was a 6-star worship of the planet Saturn. It was star worship of the planet Saturn. You notice how these planets all have names of idol gods? You ever notice how scientifically they got the name of a pantheon of idol god names? Well, they were worshiping Saturn. That planet is named after an idol god. There was an idol god called Saturn. It's the 6th planet from the sun. It was represented as a 6-pointed star, the very same 6-pointed star symbol that is on the flag of the Zionist state of Israel. All right. So here we see there's a nation claiming it's Israel, but it's a nation that has a false symbol that has nothing to do with David. It's not a star of David. It is a 6-pointed star associated with the god Remphan, a symbol. The 6-pointed star is a symbol for the planet Saturn, which is the 6th planet from the sun. And this is the flag of the Zionist state of Israel. So right there, that tells you that Israelites who are in Dimona, they have joined with the Israelis, and they drape themselves in the 6-pointed star flag of the state of Israel. They are fulfilling, again, what their forefathers did wrong in the wilderness. 6-pointed star honoring and veneration to this day. Yet they got the work of their own hands. They got nice restaurants. I go buy food at their restaurants. Good food. They claim they got a lot going on. But they ride with the 6-pointed star. They ride with the state of Israel. See what Hebrews do when they stray from the truth as they did in Dimona. They left Yahshua and they turned to a man that was a Chicago bus driver, made him their Messiah. So you see Hebrews, what they do when they stray away from the truth. They latch on to paganism that stops their attainment of the promised blessings of Yah. And so they went to Israel, they're in Dimona, and yet the curses are still on them there. They have all of the same problem among their young people. The young people here on the south side and the west side of Chicago. Yes, they got gangs, they got crack dealers. I don't have time to go and tell you all the details of it. Same thing happened with Beta Israel. They took that free ride from the impoverishment of the 80s when the entertainers sung "We Are the World," and the Israelis came and airlifted some of them to Israel, but they made them all come up under the umbrella of the six-pointed star. And some of them done got proud, think they better than other Black Jews because they were accepted by the white folk. And the white folk are willing to make them their token. And then they came, the Beta Israel, the philosopher, with false understanding of the work of their own hands. And now they riding under six-pointed star. I'm telling you, Israelites fill the cup, as Yeshua said. They fill the cup and the measure of their father, as Yeshua said. And so they are still carrying the star of Ramphan, the six-pointed star of the state of Israel, as their banner. The six-pointed star is not the Star of David. It is the star of the beast, 666. It is literally the sign and the star of the mark of the beast. COVID vaccine was not the mark of the beast. That was a distraction for people to say that. And now they see that that's not what it was. All right. Whether they took it or not, that's between them and their conscience. I'm not making a point on that. I'm just saying the mark of the beast is not a vaccine. It's the symbol of the sign of a six-pointed star. That's what it is. And it is literally the sign and the star of the mark of the beast. This six-pointed star is the symbol, which is called a hexagram, the star of Ramphan. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 18, the Greek word for 666 is hex. A hexagram is a six-pointed star symbol for the planet Saturn worship system of Babylon, which was adopted by Rome as the holiday of Saturnalia, or birth of the god Saturn, which was celebrated around the time of December 25th, which was later adopted into Christianity, Romanized Christianity, as Christmas. So Stephen was testifying how Israelites in the past, as they do now, get involved with corruptions of the pride of the work of their own hand that YAH does not bless. In conclusion, Stephen testified in verse 43, the consequences for Israelites' departure was exile beyond Babylon, which has happened, as Yeshua said in Luke 21, verse 24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. May the time of our wanderings in exile in this great captivity come to an end, and may the times of the Gentiles come to an end soon, and may the time of refreshings come upon us soon. Hallelujah. Maranatha, our Master cometh. Hallelujah.